We'll be talking about the whole entire Fish and Wildlife Service today, but a lot of the organization and administration of youth programs happens in the refuge system because we're more of the land-based part of the Fish and Wildlife Service, but we'll talk about all of that stuff. Actually, we'll get started. Is all right. Is my screen? Sorry, I lost you guys for a second. Is my screen on?
We see it now.
Okay, good. Good. Just wanted to check that. You guys have gone super small, but that's okay. I was gonna. There we go. So the Fish and Wildlife Service is a federal agency in the Department of the Interior. Obviously, the National Park Service is another agency, the Bureau of Land Management. There's a number of different agencies in the department, and we are one of several, and we share an assistant secretary with the Park Service, the Assistant Secretary of Fish and Wildlife and Parks. And we have a distinct mission that sets us apart from some of the other federal agencies. We are the fish and wildlife people. We are fish and birds and endangered species and plants and habitats. And we do this for the continuing benefit of the American people. So while we are very wildlife habitat, fish and wildlife habitat focused, we do definitely have a people component to our mission and to the work that we do. So within the Fish and Wildlife Service, as I've mentioned, and of course I highlighted refuge system because we're the ones doing the presentation, but we have a lot of different things going on. And I just wanted to walk you through some of the other programs in the Fish and Wildlife Service because there's so much good work going on. Ecological Services is one of those programs. They handle endangered species. They deal with all of the permitting, recovery of endangered species from piping plovers. And I can't see the chat. Does anyone know what the creature in the upper left-hand corner is? Maybe put it into the chat, and if Shannon or Patrick can tell me what some of the guesses are. The top left-hand corner, the slimy one.
I'm seeing salamander. I saw a hellbender. I'm seeing some hellbenders. So yes, we're getting it, which is a mud puppy. Got a mud puppy as well.
That is the Ozark hellbender, and I like those because their nickname is Snot Otter, which is disgusting, but I always like them for that reason. But Ecological Services also deals with environmental contaminants. So when there's major issues like oil spills or chemical leaks, we handle the wildlife end of that. So Deepwater Horizon was a huge issue for us when all of the oil was coming ashore and impacting habitats and birds and things like that. We were definitely a part of that. The Office of Law Enforcement. It gets a little confusing because we have two different law enforcement things going on. The Office of Law Enforcement deals a lot with international wildlife trade, and they're located at ports of entry like airports and seaports, and they make sure that endangered wildlife parts are not being smuggled in, or people will smuggle in snakes and turtles and birds and all kinds of things. So they're the folks on the front line of making sure that the stuff coming into the country, merely protecting wildlife internationally by making sure it doesn't come into the country. The Office of Law Enforcement also has special agents that deal with kind of bigger wildlife crimes, if you will. We even have a forensic laboratory in Oregon, I believe, that deals just with wildlife crimes. So, finding out from DNA whether the species, it's an endangered species or not an endangered species. So they do some really interesting work with that kind of thing. Our migratory birds program, Most of you may know this or may not. When it comes to wildlife, states have jurisdiction over certain species, resident species like deer and raccoons and things that don't move a lot. The federal government has the jurisdiction over migratory birds. And so we are protecting the more than 1,000 species of migratory birds that live in the United States. That's done through flyway councils and through different initiatives. We have something called Urban Bird Treaty Cities that really try to promote birding in urban areas and bird habitat in urban areas because it's so important, especially at this time of year. And they also administer the duck stamp program, which is a stamp that migratory bird hunters are required to buy and other people can buy, and that money goes directly into purchasing wildlife habitat. We have the Fish and Aquatic Conservation folks. They put the fish in Fish and Wildlife Service, we like to say. And they have more than 100 fish hatcheries around the country, but they do more than just raise fish at them. There's some that are raising endangered dragonflies and mollusks. A lot of mollusk species are endangered, so they're helping to create populations of those. And they also deal with aquatic health in habitats like the Great Lakes. Science applications, we are a science-based agency, and this group helps to ensure that we hold ourselves to the highest standards of science and really promote scientific integrity and work at some of the more landscape scale issues that wildlife face. Wildlife and sport fish restoration. If you've ever purchased fishing tackle or ammunition or fishing equipment, anything that has to do with hunting and fishing equipment, there's an excise tax on that. And that's collected by the Fish and Wildlife Service, and then it's sent back out to the states in the forms of grants. And those grants are for things like boat ramps or hunter access parking lots or hunter education, aquatic education, all kinds of things. So the money comes through us and then just goes back to the states to support habitat. Then we have a couple other programs like External Affairs. They help to tell our story to Congress and the media and the public in a bunch of different ways through our websites, through publications, and through different incidents. This is a practice oil spill response, so dealing with other agencies. Our joint administration operations, these are the folks who are deal with our contracting and finances and human resources and all of the behind the scenes things that are so necessary to keep the Fish and Wildlife Service moving. And it's also some of those jobs that you don't typically think about that happen in the Fish and Wildlife Service. You might be thinking biologists and park rangers and things like that, but we have engineers, we have accountants, we have financial people, we have human resources folks, we have all kinds of disciplines represented within the Fish and Wildlife Service. So I think there's some opportunities that we haven't always taken advantage of, especially with support network opportunities. And we also have an international affairs program that's operated out of headquarters, and that deals a lot with endangered animals from around the world and making sure that we can do our part to protect them. And of course, the National Wildlife Refuge System. We have 800 million acres of lands and waters from the Virgin Islands to Guam to Alaska. A lot of that is protected as marine national monuments, the vast majority of it really. And I will not pronounce it correctly. I will let Shannon pronounce it correctly later on. It'll come up on a slide. And these are really important areas for marine resources. So we're organized regionally. We have 8 regional offices around the country, and a lot of the programs have regional, we have our national youth folks on this call, but there's also people in regional offices who work a lot, I know, with a lot of your organizations to get interns on the ground and to get fellows on the ground. And as you know, there was some reorganization last year or in the last couple of years on the interior region. So the only way I can remember everything is just by the location of where the regional office is. Otherwise, if you start going by numbers, it just gets confusing. And even in both the refuge system and the hatchery system, we have different types of facilities. The vast majority of our core members are going to either national wildlife refuges or fish hatcheries. That's, I think, the vast majority of folks. So we have national wildlife refuges, which are probably what you're thinking of, is a chunk of land, various sizes that, you know, maybe from 1,000 to 200,000 or so acres, where we protect wildlife, and we have maybe an auto tour route, and we have some habitat stuff going on. We also have wetland management districts. Those are mostly geographically located in the Dakotas and western Minnesota and eastern Montana. And that's kind of a different animal. Wetland management districts work within several counties, and their goal is to either purchase or get easements on small, like 100-acre, 50-acre wetlands that are incredibly important to migrating birds, the wetlands and the grasslands surrounding them. So they'll work a lot with small landowners, farmers, and to either get an easement permission to protect a wetland or to purchase it outright. And it forms kind of a patchwork across the landscape. So they're never that large, but they're vitally important, especially to migrating waterfowl and shorebirds. As I mentioned, we have national fish hatcheries. Those are under the Fish and Aquatic Conservation folks, and there's more than 100 of them. And you might think that all they do is raise fish, but a lot of them have trails and visitor centers and picnic areas. So they have some visitor facilities, and they're usually, some of them are protecting springs, so they have a little bit more of a land base than you would think of. They're not just a building raising fish. There's usually a little bit of a land base there. And then, as I mentioned, we have our marine national monuments. Shannon, I will let you pronounce Papahanaumokuakea.
Almost. It's Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument. We almost had it.
It was so close. I'll practice for next time.
I remember the first time I saw that name, I was just like, wow.
So these are the different types of places where, especially where we're using the talents of core network participants. And I will turn it over to Shannon now.
All right. So for this afternoon, I have the pleasure of talking to you all about who has come into the administration and what their priorities are, and some of the facets that we are intimately engaged in with regard to this new administration, the Biden-Harris administration. So yesterday was a pretty historic day for the federal government and for the Department of Interior as a whole. So that whole federal family that Maggie had up on her screen. So we now have a new Secretary of the Interior. Deb Haaland was the former representative for the state of New Mexico, and is now the first Indigenous woman to head the Department of the Interior, and the first Indigenous woman that to be in a cabinet position for the presidency across the United States. So this is extremely historic for all of us in the Department of Interior federal family. And she is a 35th generation New Mexican who is an enrolled member of the Pueblo Laguna, and she is also of Jemez Pueblo heritage. So yesterday was a wonderful day. One of my friends who is Karuk from Northern California, she sent me a picture of her beautiful daughter taking a picture with Deb Haaland. So that was incredibly heartwarming to see that. So we don't, in the Fish and Wildlife Service, yet have a director, but we do have a political that is in place, and our principal deputy director, that's her title that she's been given, but she exercises the authority of the acting director for the Fish and Wildlife Service, and her name is Martha Williams, and she came from the state of Montana, so she is no stranger to natural resource issues, being that she's from Montana, and she wasted absolutely no time getting up to speed on a myriad of issues and opportunities for the service and for this administration. So as many of you all know, when the Biden and Harris administration took the helm in January, they too wasted no time. President Biden signed about 17 executive orders within his first day or days of being in office on the platform of Build Back Better. And 4 of the pillars of the administration are listed here on this slide. Unfortunately, this is the only slide you're going to see because it's pretty bland, but really great information though. So those 4 pillars are responding to COVID-19, basically containing COVID-19, building back a better economy, tackling the climate crisis, and advancing racial equity. And in the last Congress, one of the acts that was passed was the Great American Outdoors Act, and that too kind of feeds into all of the pillars of the administration. And I'm excited to let you all hear about an effort that is ongoing in the department. It's developing right now and should be ready in fiscal year 22. So with regard to the administration's 4 pillars, the National Wildlife Refuge System is perfectly situated to advance the administration's priorities. And we're particularly proud when it comes to talking about the COVID-19 efforts. So during the pandemic, the service lands have provided nearby nature experiences for a public that's been desperate to connect with wildlife beyond their home. And across the service, we quickly pivoted to start providing virtual programming for school groups and other partner groups as well. So we also joined with other agencies and outdoor industry in a Recreate Responsibly campaign that promotes safe access to nature. So although a lot of our visitor centers were closed, virtually all of them were closed, we still welcome the public out on our lands to go outdoors for a bit of respite and exercise and just to enjoy nature and get outdoors. And then in terms of this latest phase in addressing COVID-19, the pandemic, we have also been deploying veterinarians. We have about 100 or so veterinarians within the Fish and Wildlife Service and trained EMT professionals, and they are out in the field and helping to administer vaccines. But the veterinarians are not grabbing people by the scruff of their neck. It's still on the side of the arm. So we are very proud to be able to contribute to that, the current effort that's ongoing. So the service is also aiding the economy through conservation jobs and especially living wage youth jobs. It's extremely difficult, especially in these times, to make ends meet, and folks are losing their jobs. And so we're happy to be able to say that the vast majority of the jobs that we are providing compete with minimum wage or they are above minimum wage. And so that's been our one of our high focus areas for this administration with regard to those priorities. And we're protecting urban nature and creating civilian Climate Corps compatible jobs. And with the next generation of civilian Climate Corps in particular, we are addressing the barriers to youth and diverse employee retention. We're developing partnerships with youth and minority serving institutions to help increase our workforce and increase those opportunities to support career advancement job series changes, and grow youth conservation corps. I think I saw in the poll in the beginning, folks are mentioning that they had internships, and quite a few people, young folks, start their careers as YCC crew members. And I too was engaged and involved with the YCC crew. I started as a YCC crew leader when I was still in college. So it's an incredibly important opportunity that still exists today, and it employs local youth in the communities around national wildlife refuges. So along the lines of this civilian climate corps, the Biden-Harris administration, like I said, released those executive orders. And as a part of one of the executive order on tackling climate change, there's a provision in there, or a piece that speaks to 30 by 30. And it's essentially protecting 30% of the land and putting that into conservation by 2020. And we are working with a variety of partners to continue to conserve lands and restore habitat. And those efforts will help achieve that goal of 30% of lands in some form of conservation being protected by 2020. And that's not to say that the Fish and Wildlife Service or National Wildlife Refuge System is going to embark on this huge land grab. It's more working with our private land partners and local communities and others to either restore habitat or set it aside for conservation in some way, shape, or form. So that does also involve other federal agencies and states, counties, local jurisdictions, and the like. So as far as justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion efforts, we are advancing racial equity through the federal government by directing our resources and support to underserved communities, while also doing our internal work around justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, because we have a lot of work yet to do, and in particular in federal agencies, and specifically I'll speak towards Fish and Wildlife Service and National Wildlife Refuge System. We can do better in these efforts. I've been a part of this agency for 26 years, and I can say that we have a long way to go towards hiring people that represent the communities that we serve. So we are leaning in on this effort full force. And through our urban wildlife conservation program, I'll call it the urban program because urban wildlife conservation program is too hard to say over and over again. So we have reimagined outreach to and engagement with historically excluded communities near urban refuges. And I don't know if Maggie mentioned it or not, but there are over 560, there's about 567 national wildlife refuges across the country, across the US, and there's one in at least every state. And of those 560 national wildlife refuges, 101 of those are considered urban refuges because they're within 25 miles of a population that is 250,000 people or more. And so we've made strategic investments and put them towards 6 flagship urban national wildlife refuges. And we are supporting 31 designated partnership cities. And these are areas where we might not necessarily have a national wildlife refuge right next door or on site, but we can partner with those other communities who are wanting to do to make improvements and do good conservation work in the communities that they serve. So it doesn't necessarily have to be within refuges. And so that also gives us an opportunity to turn the urban program into a service-wide program. So all of those other programs that you saw Maggie mentioned in her slideshow, ecological services, Office of Law Enforcement, who are at the ports of entry, all of those programs within the service have a role to play in the urban program. And Maggie also mentioned the urban bird treaty cities that Migratory Birds is leading that effort. So at its heart, the urban program is really about people. And, you know, Maggie in the beginning said that, you know, we tend to put wildlife first. That's our mission, is that wildlife comes first. But we are committed to conserving wildlife with our communities, for our communities. And they are co-designing efforts and co-coordinating efforts to make this happen with us. So one of the other facets that I wanted to touch on is the Great American Outdoors Act. As I mentioned, it was passed by the last Congress, the outgoing Congress. But, you know, a lot of this work, you know, it involves people. Absolutely, it involves people, but it also involves funds. It also involves a budget. And so with the Great American Outdoors Act, this is an incredible opportunity. I believe the first of its kind that was passed with resounding support from both sides of, you know, the Democrats and Republicans. And this is an effort, a concerted effort to restore and lower the deferred maintenance on our infrastructure. So we have a huge backlog of deferred maintenance and infrastructure that needs care. And so that infrastructure is our roads, our buildings, our trails. I saw in the poll someone said that they don't get funded to do trail work, but they're doing it anyway. And so this is one opportunity that is a pretty incredible effort that's underway to infuse long-term funds towards that effort, towards building our infrastructure back. And with the Biden administration, I know that, you know, in the executive orders, there have also been mention of union paying jobs. And if you think about the trades and all that could come with the Great American Outdoors Act, this is all part and parcel. And then lastly, I wanted to mention one of the future projects that are in the works, and this is Department of Interior wide, and Fish and Wildlife Service is working on a new employment program in conjunction with the Park Service, and I believe the Forest Service as well. And it's called the Indian Youth Service Corps, and it's going through the approval process right now. And the program is designed to work with the tribes to provide participants with transferable skill sets and outline career paths with the federal government and our other partners. And so it's slated to roll out in 2022. And so that's going to be a really exciting opportunity for our core network partners to engage in. And you know, throughout all of these things, the common thread is that we're trying to do this work together, and that's where we will all be stronger for it. So with that, I'll hand it over to Patrick, and he can talk to you about his portion of our presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Shannon. Maggie. So the service worked with 52 partner organizations last year, large and small, regional partners, national organizations, local friends groups. And it was pretty remarkable with all the things going on with COVID, how that community of organizations came together, worked in collaboration with us to make sure that those projects that we were intending to take place last year actually occurred. We did a lot of work of, turning education projects into virtual projects, all kinds of, programs like the DFP program that, it had, traditionally an NCTC orientation program, all those kind of things were virtualized. And it was amazing that we actually, got so many interns out last year, and it was pretty exciting. And always safety was the biggest concern and the biggest driver. And many times our partners were, they were already there with their safety plans and ready to engage. And it was really remarkable. Every year that I've been involved in financial assistance, the footprint has grown in the service. The bulk of the interns come from the refuge system, but it's all of those other programs that Maggie was speaking about are all growing as well. And the types of work that interns are doing is expanding too, which is really great. We're seeing large numbers of, large increases in the number of invasive species projects taking place, and fuels management, trail projects, and all, digital media projects with the individual placements, all manner of projects taking place. And it's really exciting. Working with large partners and small partners, we work with partners that are Public Lands Corps Act partners and those that aren't. Both of those types of awards all come under the Youth Engagement Education and Employment Grant Program. In addition to that, the service does a great many awards that are non-intern based, that are youth supporting as well, like fishing derbies, education camps, events. Project types, the types of projects that the service engages. We engage in individual placements and also those crew-based projects. Probably the bulk of the projects that were deferred, and whenever it wasn't possible to place interns this year, we were able to defer the projects to the following year. Were some of those crew-based projects, because those were the ones that were hardest to implement during COVID. All of our projects are the service is required to have substantial involvement. That means we're involved in designing the project, we're managing the project. We're there to make sure that the environment is safe for the interns. The funding mechanism used is cooperative agreements. These are done either through a direct agreement with a partner organization, or in some cases as a pass-through arrangement. For instance, the Core Network worked in conjunction with the Greening Youth Foundation last year as part of the Service Directorate Fellows Program. Another example would be the Core Network working with Community Training Works for the St. Mark's Fire Preparation and Hurricane Levee Restoration Project. And the range of activities that the interns are involved with, like I say, is growing and basically spans all of the kinds of work that we do in the service. Everything from visitor services to environmental education, habitat restoration, invasive species, fire prevention, biology, fish hatchery support, data management, digital media. The list goes on. Every day there's a new type of project coming in. That's pretty exciting. Another challenge that happened last year were a lot of reorganizations and system migrations. Last year was our first year in Grant Solutions, which is our new financial system. It's going to be interior wide. The nice thing about that system is that it's a shared system between us and our partners. So we're learning it together, and it's starting to show the benefits now. Now that we're entering season number 2, many of our partners have been in the system now for 6 months, or longer, and it's really starting to come together, I think. For Youth Awards, we have 2 what's called directed announcements posted in Grant Solutions for fiscal year 21. One for education projects and one for non-education projects. All 52 of our partners that we worked with last year are associated with that posting, so it'll show up in Grant Solutions as an opportunity. We're working right now to roll out a new process for bringing in new partners so that we can get those other organizations that we're going to be working with, because it's a growing number of partners that we work with every year, into grant solutions. And there's a link on the slide here where we're going to be posting that going forward, and some instructions and contact information and a lot of materials that'll help organizations to work with the service. Finally, just a few words about the Public Lands Corps Act Hiring Authority. The requirements for that are interns have to be between the ages of 16 and 30. They have to serve 640 hours in their internship, 120 hours supporting public or federal lands. That's cumulative. Many folks do multiple interns to get there. And then at the conclusion of that, we're able to issue a non-competitive hiring authority certificate that's valid for 2 years. And as Shannon mentioned earlier, there's a lot of work that's been going on in the service over the last 6-8 months. Really trying to get a handle on our hiring authorities, and how we can better use those to get to where we want to be, as far as having a diverse and inclusive workforce. And I think a lot of that hard work is starting to show fruits, and it's pretty exciting going forward. So I think that's all that I have.
Unmute. Great, thank you, Patrick and Shannon. This is the chance to open it up for questions. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. Here we go.
Hey, Maggie, are you going to show the video now or after
I don't think I'm gonna be able to, but I'll put a link to it in the chat.
Perfect, because that's such a beautiful video.
Yeah, our communications folks have done just a really short video last year for National Wildlife Refuge Week, and I would share it, but I do not have that level of technical expertise. Having enough trouble trying to paste it into the chat. There we go. So you're welcome to look at that at your leisure. So it looks like we have some questions coming in. Good. So how does the non-competitive hiring authority work? Patrick, do you want to take that one? Or
Boy, I wish we had an HR person here for that one.
I can tell you as much as I know.
Yeah.
I can chime in too, Maggie.
Okay. So after the participant gets the 640 hours, they get a certificate that they can use. My understanding is that the position has to be advertised. In the announcement, it has to say Public Lands Corps Authority, I believe. And then they can use that certificate to apply for those positions. Debbie, do you want to expound on that a little bit more? Or was that it?
No, that's correct. And once you're issued a certificate, you have 2 years to apply. And you can apply within Fish and Wildlife Service and Park Service.
It's a huge boost to anyone who is trying to get into the service. Right now, it's only for permanent positions, but it is a great way to be a little bit more competitive for those kind of positions. I know a lot of people have struggled to get into federal government jobs, and this is a way to do that. Patrick, one for you. They submitted an application for a youth engagement, education, and employment agreement in September. They've been told the process was delayed, but haven't heard when decisions will be made.
We will be posting very soon what we call a quick sheet, which is a listing of all of the organizations that have Public Lands Corps Act status with us. That includes the organizations that applied last year and under the fiscal year 18 no funding opportunity, and also the membership of the 21st Century Conservation Service Corps, which is also included. So that will be posted soon. I don't think we have a date for that, but it'll be coming soon. I think we're pretty close with that.
Great. I think these are going to be a lot of Patrick questions.
Maggie, there was a question earlier. I just want to make sure that we address it. Does 100% of the federal duck stamp funds go to Habitat?
And my understanding is that 98% of the funds from the duck stamp goes directly towards Habitat purchase, easements, and maintenance, I believe is how it's phrased. So, am I right, Shannon? Okay. Back to Patrick. The current directed announcement has an open deadline all the way up to September 30th of 2021. Once an application is submitted, what's the timeline for hearing a decision?
So once the application comes in, it's screened, and the processing of it begins at that point. We expect the turnaround to be no more than 60 days to get that award processed. We also have the flexibility of issuing pre-award memos if there's some reason why that award isn't going to be issued on time, so that the intern can start on time. So we have that flexibility as well.
Great. What do you suggest is the best way to connect with the service about opportunities? Patrick, do you want to take that one, or I'm thinking the website, that the idea is when we get the website updated, that we put in the link that will have regional contacts and folks that you can contact about opportunities.
Yeah.
You guys have a lot of questions. Okay, I think so there's clarity that the member supervisor has to get the member approved for a certificate. Yeah, that's absolutely correct. That, the participant doesn't just say, okay, look, I finished it, here it is, but it actually gets signed by the supervisor, and it actually gets signed off on also by our regional folks at the regional office, or in headquarters. It comes through our office.
The PLC coordinator.
Yep, the PLC coordinator.
So Maggie, the other thing is kind of a two-step progress. Not only does the project leader of that fill station have to sign it, but the partnering organization has to sign it as well.
Wait. And somebody can share using the non-competitive eligibility in general, if that would be helpful. Would that be helpful? Kelly?
Yeah, so I know there were questions on how that would work. I had non-competitive eligibility by doing AmeriCorps Vista, so I could share real quick on like how that worked, if maybe it would transfer. I didn't know if people would find that helpful or not, but I just wanted to offer. So basically I just went into so we got a year of non-competitive eligibility, and so we had like a letter that said we had it, and then we were able to apply for jobs that had non-competitive eligibility, like those special hiring considerations. And then I would just attach the letter in USA Jobs as an attachment, so people knew that I had it, but then I would also put in like the summary on the USA Jobs website, like I have non-competitive eligibility through this authority. And then if I did a cover letter, I would put it in there as well. So I applied for a number of jobs, and I actually was able to get in the door with the federal government through using my non-competitive eligibility. And so the only real documentation I had to provide was just that letter verifying that I was eligible for it. But it was a pretty smooth process otherwise. And I know sometimes when I've done federal hiring before at my former agency, we would get a list of people who had non-competitive eligibility to maybe consider or look at first before the general public, or they would be on like a special list of people to consider. So that's, I know it's not specific to this land score thing, but that I would assume it's probably going to be a similar process at most agencies. So I just thought I would share if that's helpful for people.
Thank you, Kelly. We appreciate that. We have another question. If we want to apply for crew-based work with the same core program, but at 2 different fish locations, like a refuge or a hatchery, should we submit 1 application or 2 via grant solutions? Can we submit 2 simultaneously?
I think it would come down to who's managing the project, and having a discussion with them on the best way to do this. So, I mean, it could be done either way, I guess is the answer to that question, depending on the local circumstance. But it's best to have that discussion before submitting the application.
Hi, Patrick, it was my question. If I could just follow up. When you say who's managing the project, do you mean what core is managing the project, or what fish employee or agency?
Which office is sponsoring that project?
They don't know the answer. I've asked them, and they don't understand the process. They know very little about the process. They know they want to work with our core, and they would love for us to apply. They have a whole project in mind. But I've asked them, do you think I should apply 2 separate projects or 1 project? And they're like, we have no idea. You should ask the person listed on the announcement. So for us, it's the same core doing the project, but if one is at a hatchery and a different project is at a refuge.
Can you tell me who the fish contact is that you've been working with?
At each site?
Yes.
I can. Let me look that up. I'll put it in the chat.
Okay, great. And then what we can do is we'll put together a call and talk about it.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
So, Laura, if I can address that as well, what usually happens, and I hope I'm not off base or taking you down a rabbit hole, but what usually happens is when the nonprofit submits their application, and they have several field stations that they want to work with. Either the field station will reach out to that nonprofit, or the nonprofit will reach out to the field station. And then that you work together with the nonprofit for candidates. And then the nonprofit sends the field station a list of those candidates that meet the requirements of what that job is. So hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Debbie. This is for crew-based projects, not for individual intern-based projects, which seem to be allowed in the listing and encouraged in the listing. And we've done that co-planning. We have a whole plan of, me and the hatchery contact and me and the refuge contact have a whole plan of the project and how we want to do it, number of weeks, exact locations, maps. We just need to wade through the grant solutions process and get some technical advice.
Right.
Okay.
Good luck.
But any other, it's not that.
don't mean to scare you away, but you would work directly with the fill station, with those, you know, whether it's at the hatchery or whether it's at the refuge, and then
Yeah.
provide them with the applicants, and then you just go from there.
With the crew.
Yes.
Okay. And then and just as a comment as a new applicant trying to navigate this process, and I know I've been in touch by email, but you know, we tried to do the fiscal year 20 to like get on the list, and it was kind of too late and ended up not really mattering. And now we're trying to navigate this, and it's been a challenge, but worth it because we're excited. But my local contacts that I can reach they're really helpful and very excited about wanting to partner with the local Corps.
Great.
But they seem to have very little information about this youth employment engagement process, and they don't really seem to know who nationally or regionally they can contact to get assistance in trying to start a relationship with us. So I was so excited to see you guys here. Thank you so much for coming. And just wanted to pass on that feedback. And I was trying to see if there was like a regional youth partnership person I could connect with, or, you know, every federal agency is like slightly different in how they do this. So it's a bit confusing.
Right. And Laura, there is. We have regional point of contacts for this.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the information. Once we're, you know, that's the information that we're going to put out shortly, is who those contacts are, so we can get the ball rolling for situations like that.
Thank you.
Okay. Has Fish fully adopted Grant Solutions?
This is year 2 for us, so we're 100% in.
Okay. And I had kind of my own question to kind of piggyback off of an earlier one. You know, is the PLC hiring authority process the same across the regions, or does each region do it differently?
I believe it's pretty similar. One thing that's happened over the past few years is we've gone to a joint administrative operations setup where each region doesn't have its own human resources group anymore. They're kind of all glommed together. So the whole idea behind that is that there is consistency in hiring processes and all the other processes that we do. So I haven't heard too much about it, that part of the process being vastly different. It should be similar. I think there might be different levels of awareness of the availability of the PLC authority and how it's applied across regions. But I think in terms of the actual hiring process, it's consistent.
Right, and that's correct, Maggie. And one of the first steps that we did here in headquarters was to identify those public land corps coordinators, because there's regional public land corps coordinators, whereas you know, we have regional youth coordinators and we have regional public land corps coordinators, and they're not all one and the same. So we did identify those regional PLC coordinators.
Are there any other questions for Maggie, Patrick, Shannon, or Deborah? All right, if not, then I guess we can end it here. Feel free to post any other questions you may have in the Q&A section of the session page, and we will address it at some point this week. I want to again thank our presenters, Maggie and Patrick, Shannon and Deborah, for joining us. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much, and have a good day and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thanks so much for the opportunity to get it.
And thanks for helping me with my technical difficulties. You and Josh.
No worries, Shannon. That's what
You
I'm
as
here
well.
for.
I'm glad I made it. Have a good one.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you. Very interesting.